Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are, of course. Yet again, we're here for the fourth in a series of four SESAR vodcasts talking about technology, COVID-19, and what the future might look like. Today, we have one of the most important, they're all important, arguably this one's the most important of all the sessions that we have, which is to ask the people who actually use the services what it is that they want, what it is that they're looking for. So it's with enormous pleasure this morning that I get to introduce you to Alain Hervé-Bernard, who is the COO of Air France, to Joost Lammers, who is the CEO of Munich Airport, and to Florian Gillamay, who is the Executive Director of the SESAR joint undertaking. Florian has been with us, of course, all the time, but today we're at that really interesting point where literally the rubber meets the road at an airport where the aircraft land, and where what we're going to do in the future is going to have the biggest impact to be the most efficient, to be the most beneficial. But in the meantime, of course, we've got the COVID crisis running around and making life a little bit difficult. So traditionally, traditionally, people in this context always talk about either a value chain, or, which I think is wrong. I actually think the correct thing to consider is that this is an ecosystem, and that the airport is as important as the airline, is as important as the ANSP. And so in the spirit of ecosystem, I'm going to ask Joost if he'd start and perhaps ask him a question. Things are hard at the moment, but how do you see the situation from here, Joost?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. Thanks, Andrew, for the very kind invitation and for the opening of our session. And yeah, I think the corona crisis and the coronavirus really hits us, I think, harder than anything before. I mean, if I look around now, being in the industry for more than 20 years, at my airport here in Munich, but also across our ACI Europe network, and talking to airline and airport partners, I think, I think we can all agree this is something really enormously different, and something that will stay and will hit us much, much longer than anything before. I think by now we've all learned it's not a quick in and out like a V structure, but rather a long U formation. I see us really still very much on a recovery road that will take us years. Maybe some of you seen yesterday our announcement as ACI Europe also focusing on this. We rather see it 23, 24, that we maybe come back in terms of traffic volumes to a situation before the crisis. So again, this is, I think, really a very special and unique and very, very deep crisis we're all facing. So that's not good news for all our industry, but I think it's still important to talk about things we want to talk about today. More the ecosystem we are all in. Also the opportunities maybe we see at this moment. I think the ongoing work that has been done and needs to be continued with SESAR and all the topics we want to raise today. So I think it's really a very, very critical moment of the industry, but really with many years of experience also hope that we will see in some years back and look back and we'll say, okay, it was a very tough crisis, but again, we're still seeing our industry growing and developing over the decades to come. So with this very short snapshot, and maybe first intro back to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Thanks, Joost. And of course, I'm sorry, I forgot to also mention you are the president of ACI Europe, and I apologise for that.
No worries. Thank you.
So just a quick question. If we're not having a V-shaped recovery, but perhaps a U-shaped recovery, or heaven forfend an L-shaped recovery, does the long, slow bit at the bottom give us an opportunity to make the sort of changes that we're talking about, do you think? Or are we going to be so panicked by the lack of traffic that we do nothing?
Well, I think just to add to that, I think I believe it's both, and that's always a complexity. I think on the one hand, we are very much driven by the next day, the next week, the next month. I mean, I think we all feel the pressure on ourselves as key decision makers in the industry and our organizations like airlines and airports and ANSP. So I think it's a difficult balance now to keep. On the one hand, to do really what is short-term necessary, but not to forget about the mid and long-term opportunities. So I believe it's important, absolutely, to keep this really as an important element during this phase as well, because you can imagine, I think we're all about and thinking about about our organizations in terms of investment. You know, the infrastructure of an airport is a big burden for us, the financing of the infrastructure, the development of the infrastructure. And of course, the short-term reflex is always to say, okay, stop it all, cut. But again, I think that makes it so important also what we want to discuss today, to look ahead and to stay optimistic and see rather opportunities maybe. Sometimes I think in a crisis, people are really focusing on the essential things. And I think there's many to talk about and to do. So I think, we should keep this moment and rather look at the opportunities that may be given during the crisis now to us to bring things forward, with regards to SESAR and with the ecosystem, as you call it, to make really a seamless travel, to harmonize structures, processes, and maybe even to speed it up. That would be at least my big hope.
Thank you. Alain, if I can turn to you, your job as the Chief Operating Officer is by definition the day-to-day issues, isn't it? Of course, you have got to do the day-to-day stuff. But do you agree with Jos that this is an opportunity for us to actually look at some of the processes and try to change what we're doing? You're on mute, I'm afraid. No, you're good. No.
Yeah, sorry. I have some issue with my computer, but so good morning, Andrew and Florian. Thank you for giving the opportunity to express our concerns. So coming back to the current situation, I don't think that we are the only airlines strongly affected by the COVID crisis. The situation is very strange. In fact, we never faced a crisis as it involved. I have been involved in the airline industry for the last 33 years now, both in terms of magnitude and in terms of duration of the crisis. Never experienced anything like that. We know that the recovery will be low. At the deepest moment of the crisis, we only flew 2% of our operation. It was end of March, and it is a pity to see that even today we hardly fly one third of our normal operation. We had mid-July, so we knew that the recovery will be low, and we know that the next 2 years will be very difficult for Air France and for all the airline industry. What we expect, if we forget the coming months or the coming 2 years, what we expect is to recover the activity of 2019 in 3 or 4 years from now. It's a long time from now, but in fact, at the scale of the ATM transformation, it is tomorrow. It's the reason why I agree with what has been said. I mean that it is very important that we keep the momentum in the transformation of ATM. It is very important that we continue invest, because if we think about the fact that we could recover and have the same level of activity in 23 or 24 than it was in 2019, the situation in 2019 was a very poor situation in terms of performance. And in fact, in 2019, we avoid a worst case scenario compared with the situation we faced in 2018. But we avoid the worst case scenario because airline invested a lot in spare aircraft to limit the impact of delay in their operation. There was a huge work that was performed by the network manager of Eurocontrol to mitigate all the inefficiency of the system. But we do not have to forget that the average delay was twice the level of 2017. It was 3 times above the target of performance that was defined for the period. And clearly, the situation of 2019 was a very poor situation in terms of ATM performance. And then we need to take the opportunity of the crisis to accelerate the transformation of ATM. We need to invest. So there is something, it can be strange to say in the same time that in the coming years, all the stakeholders will have very strong difficulties on a financial point of view. We'll have to cut in our investments, and in the same time, we say that we need to continue to invest in ATM. But I would say that 2019 was a very important milestone in the transformation of ATM, because we had two very important outputs: the White Person Group report, the airspace architecture study, and now, and it was not the case years ago, now we have a clear view of what has to be implemented in a consistent way. What are the technologies that needs to be implemented? What is the transformation that we need to implement in the ATM? And with this clear vision, we have the possibility to optimize the investments. We stick to the recommendation and the report that were produced in 2019.
Thank you. That's a really good point, a really interesting point, isn't it? That getting back to business as usual isn't actually going to be terribly good if we're going to have the same terrible capacity problems, if we're going to have the same terrible delay issues. It's a really interesting point. So, which actually I think throws the ball to you, Florian, doesn't it? I mean, how do we get back to not usual but better? How do we get back to 2024 actually being a good year?
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew, and good morning, everyone. Well, I think I'd like to pick up on the point that Alain has just made about the fact that 2019 was somehow a special year in the sense that, yes, indeed, I think at European level, we've managed to build a consensus around what needs to be done to improve the system. While I think in the past, especially from a technical standpoint, there were a lot of diverging views on what was required and so on. I think through the years that SESAR has been developing its solution and working on the upgrade of ATM, we've managed to demonstrate that technology can bring some solutions to the questions we had before in ATM, and that we have been managed to articulate that into a kind of shared vision of how the system can evolve. And to me, this is what we need actually to accelerate the pace and to take this journey. And today, I believe that we cannot ignore that we have a situation where basically we see how the system behaves when we have traffic that increase. That was the case in 2018 and 2019. And indeed, these were two extreme years in terms of bad performance for the overall networks, with delays, with a lot of disruption for the airlines, but as well for the passengers. And then just 6 months after, we were still talking about the capacity crunch and so on. We end up with this extreme situation the other way around with the traffic, where we do realize that we do not have the traffic to manage, but we still have the cost associated to the system. And this proves one thing. This proves that one of the urgency is really to act on the scalability of air traffic management, its ability to adapt, its ability to respond to the traffic, and its ability as well to deliver the performance that is required for the airlines and ultimately for the passengers. So to me, one of the key points, if we want to move on, is really to continue to invest. It has been said already. I think this is something we have to really secure, even in those very hard times where everybody is looking for liquidity, where we do see everywhere the difficulties at airports, airlines, but all the value chain at large, or all the ecosystem, as you name it, at large is facing. We need to make sure that the financial resources that we manage to get do continue to go to investment as well. Of course, they have to sustain the operations, they have to sustain the existing system, but they have to continue to go to investment. And maybe one last thing from that standpoint, I think it's an opportunity as well to reflect upon our priorities. Because we know that we won't be able to do everything. And if we want to be ready in 3 or maybe it will be 4 years when the traffic is back, we have to provide maybe better clarity on what has to be done. And again, for that, I will build on the work that has been carried out in the context of the airspace architecture study. We know basically which are the axes to accelerate and to invest upon. It's about automation. It's about the ability to provide air traffic services from different locations, so-called virtualization techniques. And it's about managing the trajectory, which is essential for environmental purposes to make sure that we deliver benefits from a sustainable standpoint.
How much did the airspace architecture study talk about the airports, Florian? I realise that makes me sound...
It's probably not enough, I would say, in the sense that, I mean, the key focus was really to see how to bring an operational layer to the technologies that SESAR has developed. And it was primarily targeting at the organization of the airspace and overcoming as well the capacity crunch that was primarily at high altitude operation level. However, we all know that an aircraft, as you said rightly, is landing and taking off at an airport. So the cruise-to-cruise, as you like to say, Andrew, is essential. And obviously, the airport part of this journey is essential. And this is as well something on which SESAR has focused quite a lot. Maybe we can talk about it, but basically, SESAR is really not rocket science. It's basically the digital transformation that any industry knows in this world. It's about connecting information, using this information, and airports are as well a natural hub for this information. And we do see that today. They are at the core as well of the passenger journey. And if it starts badly or it ends badly at an airport, then this will provide overall not so good service. So to me, we have as well, as part of the, I would say, catalog of solutions of SESAR, quite a number of things relevant to the airport. And we have to continue to consider them as fully part of the European network. Yes, of course, this is about the upper airspace operations, but it's about as well the connectivity to the airports at the end of the day.
So thank you, Florian. Just sorry, before I get to the question for everybody, the point that Florian just made is everyone likes to talk about gate-to-gate operations, but I think that misses the point. I think the real way to analyse it is cruise-to-cruise. In other words, it's the bit in the middle that actually is the complicated part of all of that. So what do you think as an airport, how can an airport use this opportunity to improve its management of that infrastructure and its management of that process?
Yeah. Thanks again. Yeah, I think that was quite interesting to listen. I think maybe one observation before, more on a general note. I think I was really impressed. I mean, with having this new challenge above all of us, the coronavirus. I think it was amazing to see how quick then again, let's say, the fundamental cooperation works. I think that was very encouraging to see how quick airports, airlines, authorities, ANSPs. I think if I look around, this was such an unknown and big challenge for all of us, and still is, this new pandemic and the pandemic impact on us. And of course, I think we all agree it's not over. I think we still will see a lot of things coming out of that. Like I expect, for instance, a new layer of something like health, safety and security for us all in the future as airports. So there will be new challenges. But again, what I found so impressive to see is how all the airports in Europe really acted quickly into the same direction, to really develop immediately solutions to make it happen again, to restart, to recover. And I think that's the amazing power of always of a crisis. And I think having said this, I think this may be coming to your question, Andrew. I think that is important. I think so. It shows to me it can work, right? We can be much faster as an industry. We can be much more cooperative. We can be much more efficient together, like the crisis has shown to us. So I think for us as airports, it's very much also about to overcome our traditional role more as airport and infrastructure and service providers, to take up responsibility here to steer and control all these airport processes, airport-related processes, the crews, the journey of a passenger. I mean, it also, you know, for us, it's even more than going into the terminal operation, into the landside processes. But again, I think that is really a big dimension now, and it's sometimes something that I would say gives me hope, but also sometimes then if you go back out of the crisis, is unfortunately not taking again this spirit and this speed of cooperation again to overcome jointly situations like a crisis, and again to keep such a momentum more also into the future. And again, as airports, we have very much in our hands there to be the integrator on the ground, to also integrate the airports and the air traffic network. I think it's all about better communication, really reliable joint decision making. And again, the crisis of the last few weeks, I mean, we all hate it. It's still heavily impacting us. We all talk about reducing investments and reducing operational expenditure. But again, it showed we can handle it. And again, if I had a wish, I would hope we can take this joint spirit to also move even faster into the direction you were indicating as airports, airlines, ANSPs to make this now really a quicker joint win to change the approach. And again, that is something that one of the few things that is also always good in a crisis to see. The fundamentals are working. Communication during the crisis was as efficient as never before. Everyone was focusing on what is key. And again, that helped us a lot. And I hope we can again continue with this in the next few weeks, months, and years, and be also faster on what we're all discussing as ATM and SESAR these days. Yeah.
So it's all about the data, isn't it? It's all about how you exchange data and what you do with that data. So Florian, what's the role of SESAR in airport operations and exactly what you've just been talking about?
I mean, what we've been considering in the first place, in the context of SESAR for airports operation, was really to connect the airports from an ATM standpoint. So a lot of work happened in terms of managing properly the flow of aircraft at the airport, and this in connection with the rest of the ATM system, and in particular the overall European network with the network manager here in Brussels. So I mean, a lot of tools and solutions have been developed in that context. I think what we do realize here right now, which is as well maybe an outcome of this crisis, is to refocus much more on the passengers. I think what this crisis tells as well is that without passengers, there's no system anymore. There's no raison d'être for airport, for airlines, and for ATM, of course. I believe, and this is what we had already started, but it will be accelerated really, that the solution around the passenger journey will be absolutely essential in the coming months, even if not years, to have. I mean, we talk often about network-centric. I like to talk about passenger-centric operations, because I do believe this is where actually we get the value from the system. And we need to provide to those passengers predictability in their journey. I think especially considering the sanitary measures that are being put in place and added to them at the airport, boarding and so on, we need to make sure that this journey can be as smooth as possible. And therefore, again, solutions in terms of exchange of information, solutions in terms of how we protect somehow its journey are essential. And to me, this is a shift that the ATM system has to do. ATM has been built around managing airspace. We are pushing it to manage trajectories so that instead of constraining the trajectories of the aircraft, it optimizes this trajectory. And this will have to embed at some point the passenger journey as well.
I do think it's ironic that at the moment when we've got no passengers, this is a good time for us to make the system passenger-centric, but leave that irony aside for a moment. Alain, just before you dropped off there, you might have heard Just talking about he thinks there's been considerably more cooperation recently. He's seen a lot of very speedy cooperative work together. Is that your experience as well? Are you thinking that there has been cooperation, and what do you think we can use the cooperation to build better in the future?
Yes, thank you. Always some problem with my computer. Patient, I am with you. Maybe just before coming on the importance of cooperation with airports, like many airlines, we have designed huge program to improve operational performance of the airlines. So when we deal about operational performance, we address issues regarding design of the operation. Of course, we look at the efficiency of all our processes. We look at the efficiency of our coordination of all the processes in the airline. We are talking about digitalization of the process. We are talking about the culture of the people involved in the operation. And we were very happy last year to realize the best year we never realized in terms of operational performance. And we were at the top 5 airlines in terms of on-time performance. In this program, we developed some first initiative of cooperation with the airport. We have of course identified that it was very important to improve the predictability of the operation, and it is very important that we exchange information to improve the situation at the border. It is very important that we exchange information between airport and airlines of what happened at the security check. It is very important that we work closely with the airports to have a better management of the luggage that have a strong impact in the efficiency of our operation. And now, if I come back to the past few weeks and what we had with the crisis, it's clear that the sanitary process that we have implemented have a strong impact on the performance of our operation, and clearly show a need of greater cooperation and exchange of information between airports and airlines to have a consistent process in this period. And in that perspective, I really welcome the initiative of EASA that provide to airlines, airports, and in fact also customers a set of good practices to avoid to implement specific processes on some destinations that put a lot of pressure in our operation. And clearly, the implementation of social distancing or the implementation of all the check of documents that are required by the authorities put a lot of pressure on the passenger flow, a lot of pressure on capacity constraints, and a lot of pressure also on the transfer process in the airport. And when you operate only 5% of your operation, when you only have 30% of your passenger in your aircraft, you can manage all these processes that we have implemented in the COVID crisis. But when the recovery is there, when the load factor is increasing, there is a stronger need to exchange information between airports and airlines, because what happens on the operation on the landside side has a strong impact on the operation on the air side. And if I come back to the original collaboration between airlines and airport, we start 15 years ago with a very efficient CDM process between Aéroport de Paris and all the airlines in Charles de Gaulle. And we are now very effective, very efficient to manage, I will say, big disruption that are now very well managed with a strong cooperation between airports, airlines, and the ATC control. But we need to go. Further, and we see, and clearly the COVID crisis is a very good proof of the need of cooperation, also to take into account what happened the landside operations, and then we start to see some initiative in some airports. With airport who want to create their what they call their APOC, their airport operation center, to have to better exchange information of what happened on the land side, in fact to improve the efficiency of the ecosystem of the airport, and then to meet this objective that the ATM also include what happens in and out of the airport. I don't hear you.
I'm normally not muted. Sorry about that. Yes, thank you. That's really interesting, and it raises a really interesting topic for me. And maybe this is a question for you, Just, which is, where is the boundary of what the airport does? Do you think the airport's becoming more of a, what's the word I want, an integrated resource manager, an asset manager, more than just an infrastructure provider, I guess is what I'm trying to say, some sort of value-adding provider or value-adding partner in what's going on? I'm really interested in where that line is.
Yeah, I think we would love to be that and in that role. And I think I could not agree more to that than what you were looking at, Andrew, but also what I think Florian touched upon. I mean, that is very much what's in the center of all our business. It's for all of us, it's a happy passenger who's traveling. That's our focus area. And I think if I look back also 50 years, but I mean, the traditional discussions decades ago always, whose passengers are we talking about, right? This was a discussion about airlines and airports and retailers, and everyone was saying it's my passengers, my passengers. I think the answer is clear. The passenger does not care. I think that's a lesson at least we saw during the last few months. Passengers, if they're not able to travel for whatever reason, they will not visit our airports, not come and fly, and not buy tickets. So I think that's what really brings us together, especially in the crisis. If we have these travel restrictions, if we have this new sanitary concepts at the airport, but also, of course, in the aircraft, the questions about is it safe and healthy to travel by air? So I think as an industry, I think that was really the big lesson, I think, from the last few months. And also as a positive one, I can also confirm what we just heard about the Air France developments there. We have seen similar here at the airport in Munich, that with our airline partners, and we're a big partner for Lufthansa here, we were jointly, cooperatively discussing how to really reinvent, redesign the best processes here at the airport, on the ground, in the air, whatever was needed under the new sanitary concepts, right? To really test and trial, to cooperate, to make it really happen, that passengers feel safe, travel safe, buy tickets, are happy passengers again. So I think, again, is the positive takeaway from the crisis. It showed we need to do it together. Of course, I also agree we could be more active as airports, and should be, to have the data, the communication on the ground. So I think this is something positive. It it worked under the crisis. And still having one little but, I would say, what we also see on the other end from the crisis is, of course, it came immediately to the question sometimes when redesigning processes and redesigning the passenger journey under health standards, the question about cost allocation, responsibilities, investment. So I think money is, of course, is always an issue and will be. And my feeling is there a little bit, maybe also having in a closing note, of course, our request as airports that we believe we saw a lot of really support in the first phase for airlines. Fair enough, national European health packages, a lot of money to keep going. But, you know, the airports are suffering, really suffering these days a lot everywhere. We see the impact of the crisis. So I think it's important also from here to send the message we need their European funding, we need support as airports for these special projects, and we need them really desperately to really have the support from the crisis. But also, I think also something we did not touch upon, but as we all know, the Green Deal will continue. And I think we all agree, we believe that's very important. As airports, we are committed. We want to become carbon neutral, decarbonize. So even more, we have the challenges to combine this with the new challenge of the pandemic. So we need also to talk about money, and can only encourage the EU funding, all programs to keep going, open them, supporting airports and joint initiatives to continue on this road.
We haven't touched on the Green Deal yet. We've still got a few minutes. There's a bunch of things I want to unpack in what you've just said, including asking you the question, with all this data exchange, what data do we actually need to exchange? But so I'll put that question out there and come to you, Alan, and ask you a double-barrel question, if I may, which is, what data do we need to exchange, do you think? And secondly, the Green Deal. I mean, all this pandemic means we can forget about the Green Deal, doesn't it? We can just ignore that stuff now. I mean, no passengers, no environmental problems.
Yes, I'm sorry, Andrew, but really the sound in my office is very poor. So if you can come back on your two questions, I will try to.
Surely. My first question was, what data do you think you need to exchange with the airports to make, and the ANSPs at the ground? And then secondly, my question to raise the point that Jost raised is the Green Deal, and how does that continue to apply? It may not be the sound in your office, Alan, it may be my Australian accent that's causing the problem here.
Okay, so what we have experienced in our process, and it was the first example of exchange of information that we have implemented in our processes, is all the benefits that we can take in including in our system the knowledge of the passenger who already passed through the security check. When we are managing the flight at the boarding gate, when we have to take some decision to close the boarding at a certain moment to guarantee that the flight will be able to depart on time, it's very important to integrate this information in our information system, because, to make it simple, if 20 minutes before the flight the passenger has not go through the security check, there is few chance that it will be on time at the boarding gate. So this is a very practical example of kind of data we can exchange. In another way, it is very important that we exchange with the airport the reality of our schedule and the prediction we have in our passenger flow on each flight, so they can adjust the number of staff they will put at the security check, the number of staff they will put at the border, to guarantee that the fluidity at the airport is at an excellent level, because we know that this fluidity has a huge impact on our operation. And so we are developing on our main base with Aéroport de Paris this concept of exchanging data, because we have demonstrated that of course we can make a lot of improvement in our operation, in working in our own processes, but the exchange of data can make the system more efficient. To coming back on your the second part of your question about Green Deal, just maybe to start to say that the aviation industry have taken very strong commitment for the future to reduce carbon emission. We have global aviation long-term targets to reduce carbon emission in 2050 by 50% compared with the situation of 2005. So we are relying on new aircraft, new technology, new fuel, new processes. But what we have experienced in the last few years is that it is too far. It is not enough, and people, customers, citizens, member states are putting a lot of pressure on us to have a more short-term objective. So it's the reason why for Air France we have decided to reduce the carbon emission also by 50% on passenger kilometer by 2030. And then we will invest in new aircraft. We will take the opportunity to integrate in our operation a part of biofuel. We'll experiment new processes. What we have seen in the current context it is that it is not enough to. We still have a lot of pressure, and it is the reason why we have taken very recently, in the context of the COVID crisis, in the context of the strong support that the member state has given to the airline, to reduce carbon emission by 50% on the domestic flights, on the point-to-point activity. We will reduce it by 50% in 4 years from now. So it is a very short-term target that will comply with accelerating the renewal of the fleet on the medium haul. We will also define a new balance in what is on the domestic operated by airlines and operated by the high-speed train. We will integrate new processes. And in fact, in that context of huge pressure on the airline industry, it is very important that the ATM take also its part of this goal that apply on all the industry. And the original objective to reduce the carbon emission in Europe by 10% in eliminating all the inefficiencies in the airspace in this context is very important. It's very important also that we are able to have very quick results in that domain, because it will probably have a strong impact in the capacity, the ability to grow in the next 10 or 20 years.
Thank you. Thank you. That's, I mean, there's an ATM issue there, there's an operations issue there, there's also an airports issue there. We are officially, strictly, we're out of time, but I'm going to ask everyone's indulgence for just a couple more minutes, if I may, and ask one last question to everyone, maybe starting with you, Jost, if I could, which is, what is the one thing you would like to see happen? What is the one project you think we could be doing during this crisis that would make things better for everyone?
Well, I think the one big thing, with or without crisis, I think what in the wider context of our discussion, what I believe, being also now a little bit in the discussion and cooperation, we have at the moment the German presidency, the European presidency, and looking about our industry. My big hope and wish is still the Single European Sky project, honestly. That is, I think, something, needless to say, about all the advantages, all the things connecting to it, right? Less delays, less fuel burn, less CO2 emission. I think this is, well, you ask for a wish, Andrew, so you get a big one, right? I mean, why should I? Don't want to be shy here with you, but I think that is something we really deserve. I'm not sure if the German presidency will solve it until the end of the year, but I think this is something not to forget about. It's really, we need not to give up on that one.
Absolutely. Well, my diary is clear for the rest of the day, so I think we should be good to go. Alain, what is your one big wish for what we could do that will accelerate the recovery?
Yes. Sorry, I will say 2 points. I will mention 2 points. So the current amount, the activity is very low. So we expect to face 0 delay en route cause our operation. I think that we can manage that with strong cooperation, strong exchange of information between all the airlines, airport, and all the stakeholders. And the second part, which is important and which refers to the fact that we continue to support the need of investment. And I will say a point like that. Okay, we believe that we need to continue to invest, but we don't want to pay twice. And I will give and I will illustrate my point. As airline, we will invest and we will continue invest in integrating new aircraft in our fleet, new system, and we are what we expect is that all the stakeholders invest at the same pace, and that we start to stop to be charged for all system because some other stakeholders are not making the investments that are illustrated in the airspace architecture. So it is very important that if all the stakeholders are committed to invest for a better ATM in the future, it is important that we invest at the same pace and that we take benefit of that.
Thank you. That's a really interesting answer. And interestingly, yesterday in the discussion on digitalisation, we had exactly the same point, that at the moment we don't encourage uplift, we don't encourage change, and we're stuck in what is effectively a slow bicycle race, where the winner is the person who goes around the track the slowest, not the person who goes around the track the quickest. And I think that's a really important issue. Thank you for raising that. Florian, last word to you. What is the one thing you think that we need to do?
It's quite hard, actually, because I mean the CES has been covered, the need for investment has been covered. I would just bring it back maybe to SESAR in that context, and to say that maybe we have out of this crisis something which we could use as an opportunity in the next 2 years to accelerate the pace of SESAR implementation. I think this is really a focus that we have to take to use this time window to advance significantly on the upgrade of the system, because we will need it at some point in time. And to me, the acceleration is absolutely a must if we want to be successful in the future of ATM and aviation.
Thank you. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for your support and the comments. I hope you found this as interesting as I did. I apologise for the technical issues, but I think notwithstanding those, we got through it, and I'm grateful for that. And it all comes back to the single European skies. Who knew? So I'd like to thank you for your participation. I hope you have a great summer. We are planning to do a few more of these in the autumn, and I look forward to your company then. And in the meantime, thank you and have a good afternoon.
Thank you. You too.